The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., but Diana Roberts was already awake. She had been staring at the ceiling for the past hour, her mind racing through the events that would unfold today. Tonight wasn't just any night. Tonight, she would stand on stage at the most prestigious technology gala in the country and accept an award that represented 15 years of blood, sweat, and determination. Diana rolled out of bed and walked to her window, looking out at the New York skyline that was just beginning to catch the first rays of sunlight. Her penthouse apartment was a far cry from the cramped studio where she had started her company. Back then, she had been working 3 jobs just to pay rent while coding late into the night, building what would eventually become Nexus Solutions. She still remembered that first night in her tiny garage when the breakthrough came. After months of failed attempts, her software finally ran perfectly. The supply chain optimization platform she had created could save companies millions of dollars and months of time. Diana had jumped up from her old laptop, tears streaming down her face, knowing she had created something that would change everything. That was 15 years ago. Now Nexus Solutions was worth $500 million and employed over 3,000 people. Diana had built it from absolutely nothing, turning down countless buyout offers along the way because she believed in her vision. She wanted to prove that a woman who looked like her could build something lasting, something that mattered. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her assistant, reminding her about the final meeting with the lawyers before tonight's gala. Today wasn't just about accepting an award. Today was also about finalizing the biggest deal of her career. Whitmore Industries had been pursuing Nexus Solutions for 2 years. The Whitmore family had built their empire over a century, starting with steel mills and expanding into everything from real estate to technology investments. They were offering $1 billion for her company. $1 billion. The number still felt surreal every time she thought about it. Diana had wrestled with the decision for months. Part of her wanted to keep building, to see how far she could take Nexus Solutions on her own, but another part of her knew this deal would secure the futures of her employees and give her the resources to tackle even bigger challenges. The Whitmore family had promised to keep her as CEO and give her complete creative control. On paper, it seemed perfect. She spent the morning in meetings, reviewing contracts and discussing the final details with her legal team. Everything was ready. The papers would be signed on Monday morning, making her one of the richest self-made women in America. But money had never been her primary motivation. Diana wanted to prove that barriers could be broken, that success came from hard work and brilliant ideas, not from who you knew or what you looked like. By afternoon, Diana was at the salon getting ready for the gala. As she sat in the chair, she thought about her journey. She had grown up in a working-class neighborhood where college seemed like an impossible dream. Her mother had cleaned offices at night to pay for Diana's computer programming classes. Her father had worked double shifts at the factory, always encouraging her to reach higher. They would both be watching tonight's ceremony on television, probably crying with pride. Diana's success meant everything to them because they had sacrificed so much to make it possible. She had never forgotten where she came from or the people who believed in her when no one else would. The stylist held up the navy blue gown Diana had chosen for tonight. It was elegant but not flashy, professional but still striking. She wanted to look the part of a successful CEO while staying true to herself. The dress represented everything she had worked for: respect, recognition, and the right to stand among the most powerful people in technology. As evening approached, Diana felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had spoken at hundreds of conferences and meetings, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she would be on stage accepting an award that recognized her as one of the most innovative entrepreneurs of her generation. The Entrepreneur of the Year award had never been given to someone who looked like her before. The car ride to the gala venue gave her time to review her acceptance speech one last time. She had written it herself, wanting every word to reflect her authentic voice. Diana planned to talk about breaking barriers and creating opportunities for others who face similar challenges. She wanted to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs who might be watching from their own cramped apartments and garages. The venue was breathtaking. The grand ballroom had been transformed into a technological wonderland, with LED displays showing the achievements of this year's honorees. Diana could see the stage where she would soon stand, addressing an audience of the most influential people in the industry. As she walked through the crowd, Diana noticed the mix of reactions. Some people approached her with genuine warmth and respect, congratulating her on the award and her company's success. Others kept their distance, observing her with curiosity or skepticism. She had learned to read these social dynamics over the years, understanding that her presence in these spaces still surprised some people. Near the bar, Diana spotted Charles Whitmore III, the patriarch of the Whitmore family. He was surrounded by his usual circle of associates, all men who had inherited their positions and wealth. Charles had built upon his family's empire, but he had started with advantages Diana could never have imagined. Despite their different backgrounds, Charles had always been professional in their previous meetings. He seemed to respect her accomplishments and had spoken enthusiastically about bringing Nexus solutions into the Whitmore portfolio. His family members had been polite during the negotiations, though Diana had noticed some subtle tensions she couldn't quite identify. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of their partnership. After the award ceremony, they would make their announcement about the acquisition. The business press was already speculating about the deal, and Diana knew her acceptance speech would be scrutinized for any hints about her company's future. As she moved through the crowd, Diana felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond money or recognition. She had built something meaningful from nothing. She had created jobs, solved real problems, and proven that excellence could come from unexpected places. No matter what happened next, no one could take away what she had achieved. The lights dimmed, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Diana took her seat at the table reserved for tonight's honorees, straightening her dress and preparing herself for the moment she had worked her entire career to reach. In a few hours, she would stand on that stage and accept an award that represented not just her success, but the possibility of success for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The ceremony began with a video montage showcasing the achievements of this year's honorees. When Diana's segment played, showing her journey from startup founder to industry leader, the audience responded with enthusiastic applause. She watched herself on the giant screens, still amazed that her story was being celebrated on such a grand stage. Throughout dinner, Diana found herself in conversations with venture capitalists, fellow entrepreneurs, and technology leaders. Everyone wanted to know about her company's innovative approach to supply chain management. She explained how Nexus Solutions had revolutionized logistics for major corporations, saving them millions while reducing environmental impact. When her name was called for the Entrepreneur of the Year award, Diana felt her heart racing as she walked to the stage. The spotlight was blinding, but she could feel the energy of the crowd. This was her moment, the culmination of everything she had worked toward. Her acceptance speech was powerful and heartfelt. Diana spoke about the importance of perseverance, about believing in yourself when others doubt you, and about using success to lift others up. She talked about her team at Nexus Solutions, giving credit to the brilliant minds who had helped build the company. Success isn't just about reaching the top, Diana said, looking out at the sea of faces. It's about making sure the ladder is still there for the next person climbing up behind you. Tonight I accept this award not just for myself, but for every entrepreneur who has been told they don't fit the mold. The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. Diana could see people wiping their eyes, genuinely moved by her words. This was what she had hoped for. Not just recognition for her achievements, but a platform to inspire others who faced similar challenges. After the ceremony, the real networking began. This was where deals were made and partnerships were formed. Diana moved through the crowd with confidence, her award in hand, ready to discuss the future of Nexus Solutions with potential partners and investors. She was particularly excited to speak with the Whitmore family about their acquisition deal. The announcement had been delayed until after the ceremony to avoid overshadowing the award, but now it was time to discuss the final details. Everything had been negotiated except for a few minor points about employee retention and company culture. Diana approached the Whitmore family table, where Charles was seated with his wife Margaret, his son Richard, and his daughter Patricia. They had claimed the best table in the house, positioned perfectly to see and be seen by everyone in the ballroom. The table was surrounded by other wealthy families and business leaders, creating an exclusive inner circle within the already exclusive event. "Congratulations on your award," Charles said, standing to greet her. That was quite a speech. Very inspiring. His tone was polite but somewhat formal, lacking the warmth Diana had expected for such a momentous occasion. "Thank you," Diana replied, setting her award on the table. "I'm excited to discuss our partnership. I think Nexus Solutions and Whitmore Industries can accomplish incredible things together." Margaret Whitmore, an elegant woman in her 60s, smiled tightly. "Yes, we're all very interested to see how this works out." There was something in her voice that made Diana pause, a subtle emphasis on certain words that suggested skepticism. Richard Whitmore, Jr., who was about Diana's age, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "I have to ask," he said, "how much of the company's success was really your doing? I mean, you must have had quite a team helping you with the technical aspects." Diana felt a flicker of irritation but maintained her professional composure. "I wrote the original code myself," she explained calmly. "I have degrees in computer science and business administration. The core algorithms that power our platform are my creation." "Oh, I'm sure you're very capable," Richard continued, his tone becoming more condescending. "It's just that supply chain optimization is incredibly complex. Most people don't realize how many moving parts are involved." "I'm quite familiar with the complexity," Diana replied, her voice remaining steady despite her growing frustration. "That's exactly why I spent 5 years developing our proprietary algorithms before bringing the product to market." Patricia Whitmore, who had been quietly sipping her wine, finally spoke up. "You have to understand our perspective. We've been in business for over 100 years. We've seen a lot of companies come and go, especially with all these diversity initiatives pushing people into positions they might not be ready for." The comment hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Diana felt the blood rushing to her face, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had dealt with subtle discrimination throughout her career, but rarely had it been this blatant. "Diversity initiatives didn't build my company," Diana said firmly. "Hard work, innovation, and 15 years of dedication built my company. The same things that build any successful business." Charles seemed uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but instead of correcting his family members, he changed the subject to technical details about the acquisition. However, his questions revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of how Nexus Solutions actually worked. "Your software is basically just an advanced scheduling system, right?" Charles asked. "We have plenty of people who could maintain something like that once the deal is finalized." Diana realized that despite months of negotiations and presentations, the Whitmore family still didn't grasp the sophisticated technology behind her company. They saw Nexus Solutions as a simple logistics tool, rather than the revolutionary artificial intelligence platform it actually was. "It's much more than scheduling," Diana explained patiently. "Our AI system predicts supply chain disruptions weeks in advance, optimizes routing in real time, and learns from every transaction to improve efficiency. The technology is years ahead of anything else in the market." Richard laughed dismissively. "Artificial intelligence? Come on, that's just marketing speak. It's probably just some basic automation with a fancy name." Diana felt her patience wearing thin. She had spent years explaining her technology to investors and clients, but she had never encountered such willful ignorance from people who were supposed to be her partners. "Perhaps you should spend some time reviewing the technical documentation," Diana suggested. "I'd be happy to have my chief technology officer walk your team through the architecture." "Oh, we'll definitely want our people to examine everything closely," Margaret said with a sharp smile. "Due diligence, you understand. Can't be too careful these days." The implications were clear. They didn't trust Diana's claims about her own technology. They saw her as someone who had somehow stumbled into success rather than earned it through talent and hard work. Other guests at nearby tables were beginning to notice the tension. Diana could see people glancing over, trying to eavesdrop on the conversation. She realized that this discussion was becoming a public spectacle, which was the last thing she wanted. "Maybe we should continue this conversation in a more private setting," Diana suggested, trying to salvage the situation. "No need," Charles said, his voice becoming more forceful. "We're all adults here. We can speak plainly." The alcohol was clearly affecting the Whitmore family's judgment, making them bolder in expressing opinions they might normally keep to themselves. Diana could smell the wine on their breath and noticed the empty bottles accumulating on their table. "Look," Richard said, leaning forward aggressively. "We're offering you $1 billion for what is essentially a glorified scheduling app. You should be grateful for the opportunity." Grateful, Diana repeated, her composure finally beginning to crack. I built a company that revolutionized an entire industry. You're not doing me a favor by recognizing its value. The conversation was spiraling out of control, and Diana knew she needed to find a way to de-escalate before something irreversible happened. But the Whitmore family seemed determined to put her in what they considered her proper place. You people always think you're owed something, Patricia muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Diana to hear. Diana felt as if she had been slapped. The mask was completely off now. This wasn't about business anymore. This was about something much deeper and more troubling. Diana stared at Patricia for a moment, processing what she had just heard. The phrase, "you people," echoed in her mind, carrying with it the weight of countless similar encounters throughout her career. But this time was different. This time she wasn't going to let it slide. "Excuse me?" Diana said, her voice quiet but firm. "What exactly did you mean by that comment?" Patricia's face flushed red, realizing her words had been heard more clearly than she intended. "I didn't mean anything by it," she stammered, looking around the table for support from her family members. "Yes, you did," Diana replied, standing up straighter. "You meant exactly what you said. So let's be honest about what's really happening here." The conversation at nearby tables was beginning to quiet down, as people sensed the tension building at the Whitmore table. Several prominent technology executives and investors were now openly watching the exchange, their own conversations forgotten. Charles tried to intervene. "Perhaps we're all getting a bit emotional," he said, attempting to sound reasonable. "It's been a long evening and there may have been some misunderstandings." "There's no misunderstanding," Diana said, her voice growing stronger. "Your family has made it very clear what you think of me and my accomplishments. You don't believe I actually built this company. You think I'm some kind of diversity hire who got lucky?" Richard leaned back in his chair, no longer trying to hide his disdain. "Look, we're not trying to be mean here. We're just being realistic. Companies like yours pop up all the time. Someone gets some government funding, hires a few smart programmers, and suddenly they think they're the next big thing." "Government funding?" Diana's voice rose slightly, drawing even more attention from the surrounding tables. "I mortgaged my apartment to start this company. I worked 3 jobs while coding at night. I didn't take a salary for the first 2 years. Every penny of funding came from private investors who believed in my vision." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "That's a nice story, dear, but we've heard it all before. These days, everyone claims to be self-made." Diana felt something inside her snap. She had spent her entire career proving herself over and over again, watching less qualified people get opportunities simply because they fit a certain image. She had accepted it as the price of success, always taking the high road, always staying professional. But tonight, holding the award that represented her life's work, she was done playing by those rules. "You want to know what's really happening here?" Diana said, her voice now carrying clearly across the ballroom. "You're afraid. You're afraid that someone who doesn't look like you built something better than anything your family ever created. You're afraid that merit actually matters more than connections." Charles stood up abruptly, his face darkening with anger. "How dare you speak to my family that way? We built an empire while you were still playing with toys." "You inherited an empire," Diana shot back. "There's a difference." The ballroom was now almost completely silent, with hundreds of pairs of eyes focused on their table. Phones were coming out of pockets as people began recording what was clearly becoming a significant confrontation. "You need to learn some respect," Charles said, his voice shaking with rage. "Just because someone gave you an award doesn't mean you can talk to your betters that way." "My betters." Diana laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you think you are? Better than me?" Richard stood up next to his father, his face twisted with contempt. "We're offering you more money than someone like you could ever dream of. And this is how you respond? With attitude and disrespect? Someone like me?" Diana repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. "There it is again. Say what you I mean." Margaret tried to salvage the situation, realizing how bad this looked with so many people watching. "Perhaps we should all calm down and discuss this privately," she said, glancing nervously at the phones pointed in their direction. But Charles was beyond reasoning now. Years of entitlement and privilege had never prepared him for being challenged so directly, especially not by someone he considered beneath his social status. The alcohol, the public setting, and his wounded pride combined into a perfect storm of poor judgment. "You know what your problem is?" Charles said, pointing his finger at Diana. You don't know your place. You think that award makes you special, but you're still just an ungrateful. Choose your next words very carefully. Diana interrupted, her voice deadly quiet. Charles paused for a moment, seeming to realize he was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The entire ballroom held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. For a brief second, it seemed like he might step back from the brink. Instead, his entitled rage won out over common sense. You need to learn your place, he said. And before anyone could react, his hand flew through the air and struck Diana across the face with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent ballroom. The slap was so unexpected, so shocking that for a moment nobody moved. Diana's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow, her hand instinctively rising to her stinging cheek. The sound seemed to reverberate through the vast space, followed by gasps and shouts of disbelief from the crowd. Security personnel who had been stationed around the room began moving toward the table, but they seemed as stunned as everyone else. This was supposed to be a civilized gathering of business leaders, not the scene of a physical assault. Diana slowly turned her head back to face Charles, her eyes blazing with a mixture of shock, pain, and absolute fury. Her cheek was already beginning to redden where his hand had connected. She could taste blood where she had bitten her tongue from the impact. The Whitmore family members sat frozen in their chairs, their faces pale with shock. Even they seemed to realize that Charles had gone too far. Margaret's hand was pressed to her mouth in horror, while Richard and Patricia stared at their father as if seeing him for the first time. Phones were now recording from every angle, capturing the aftermath of an incident that would be replayed millions of times over the coming days. Diana was acutely aware that whatever happened next would define not just this moment, but potentially the rest of her career. She could feel the eyes of every person in the ballroom on her, waiting to see how she would respond. Some faces showed sympathy and outrage on her behalf. Others seemed to be watching with morbid curiosity, perhaps even hoping for more drama. Diana took a deep breath, her mind racing through her options. She could scream, cry, or lash out physically. She could demand that security arrest Charles immediately. She could storm out in tears and let the incident speak for itself. Instead, she chose something else entirely. Diana straightened her dress, touched her cheek one more time to confirm it was still stinging, and looked directly into Charles Whitmore's eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and carried across the silent ballroom with perfect clarity. "Congratulations, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "You just showed everyone in this room exactly who you really are." The silence that followed Diana's words was deafening. Charles stood there, his hand still raised slightly from the slap, his face a mixture of shock and defiance. He seemed to be processing what he had just done, but instead of apologizing, his jaw tightened with stubborn pride. Diana could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, but she refused to look away from Charles. This was a defining moment, not just for her, but for everyone watching. How she handled this would send a message that would resonate far beyond this ballroom. "You think you can talk to me however you want because of some diversity award?" Charles said, his voice shaking with rage. "My family built this industry. We decide who succeeds and who fails." Diana felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The slap had been shocking, humiliating, and painful, but it had also clarified everything. All the subtle discrimination she had faced over the years, all the questions about her qualifications, all the comments about diversity initiatives. It had all led to this moment of brutal honesty. "Your family didn't build anything," Diana said, her voice steady and clear. "Your great-grandfather built something, and you've been living off his accomplishments ever since. The only thing you've built is a reputation for entitlement." Margaret Whitmore finally found her voice, though it was weak and shaky. "Charles, what have you done?" she whispered, looking around at the sea of recording phones and shocked faces. Richard and Patricia remained silent, perhaps finally realizing that their casual bigotry had escalated into something that would destroy their family's reputation. The alcohol that had loosened their tongues earlier now seemed to have sobered them instantly. Diana reached for her purse and her award, moving with deliberate calm. Every gesture was measured and dignified, a stark contrast to Charles's loss of control. She knew that every second of this interaction was being recorded and would be analyzed endlessly in the coming days. "You know what the really sad part is?" Diana said, adjusting the strap of her purse on her shoulder. "I actually believed you were different. I thought you understood the value of what my company had built. I thought you saw past surface-level prejudices to recognize real innovation. Charles's face was turning red. Whether from embarrassment or continued anger, Diana couldn't tell. We offered you $1 billion, he sputtered. $1 billion for your little software company. You should be kissing our feet. There it is again, Diana said with a bitter smile. My little software company. The company that revolutionized supply chain management for Fortune 500 corporations. The company that saves our clients hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The company that employs 3,000 people and has never had a data breach or system failure. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. But to you, it's just a little software company built by someone who should be kissing your feet. That tells me everything I need to know about this deal. Security personnel had finally reached the table, looking uncertain about how to handle a situation involving some of the most powerful people in the room. The head of security, a professional-looking woman in her 40s, approached cautiously. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, though the answer was obvious to everyone present. Diana looked at the security officer, then back at Charles. "This man just physically assaulted me in front of hundreds of witnesses," she said clearly. "I think that qualifies as a problem." The security officer's eyes widened as she processed the implications. Assaulting someone at such a high-profile event would normally result in immediate arrest. But the people involved made this an extremely delicate situation. Charles seemed to realize for the first time that there could be serious legal consequences for his actions. "It was barely a tap," he said defensively. "She's being dramatic." "A tap?" Diana touched her still stinging cheek. "Is that what you call striking someone across the face, a tap?" By now, the incident had attracted the attention of event organizers, who were whispering urgently among themselves near the stage. This was supposed to be the most prestigious technology gala of the year, and it was turning into a public relations nightmare. Diana made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of demanding Charles's immediate arrest, she turned to address the entire ballroom. Her voice carried clearly through the sound system, which was still active from the evening's presentations. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, and the entire room fell silent. "I want to thank you for witnessing what just happened here. You've seen something that happens more often than you might think, but usually behind closed doors where there are no cameras and no witnesses." She gestured toward the Whitmore family table, where Charles stood looking increasingly uncomfortable under the scrutiny of hundreds of people. Mr. Charles Whitmore III, heir to a century-old fortune, just struck me across the face because I had the audacity to defend my company's value and my own accomplishments. He did this because, in his mind, I don't know my place. The crowd was hanging on every word, many people still recording on their phones. Diana could see tears in some eyes, anger in others, and uncomfortable recognition on many faces. "But here's what Mr. Whitmore doesn't understand," Diana continued, her voice growing stronger. "My place isn't beneath anyone. My place is wherever my hard work, intelligence, and determination take me. And right now my place is walking away from $1 billion deal that would have made his family even richer while compromising everything I've built." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. $1 billion deal was enormous by any standard, and walking away from it would be front-page news in every business publication. Diana turned back to face Charles directly. "Mr. Whitmore, you just cost your family $1 billion and showed everyone in this room exactly what kind of people you are. I hope it was worth it." Charles's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The enormity of what he had lost was beginning to sink in, along with the public humiliation that would follow. "You can't just walk away," he said desperately. "I have contracts. We have agreements." "Actually, we don't," Diana replied calmly. "We have a letter of intent and months of negotiations, but no signed contracts, and after tonight there never will be." She turned once more to address the crowd, many of whom were now standing to get a better view of the historic confrontation. "To everyone watching, both here and at home when this inevitably goes viral, I want you to remember something. Your dignity is not for sale, no matter how much money is on the table. Your principles are not negotiable, no matter how powerful the people trying to compromise them." Diana picked up her Entrepreneur of the Year award and held it high for everyone to see. This award represents more than individual achievement. It represents the possibility that anyone, regardless of their background, can build something meaningful if they work hard enough and refuse to give up. What happened here tonight doesn't change that. If anything, it proves why that message is more important than ever. The ballroom erupted in applause, with many people giving Diana a standing ovation. She could see tears in the eyes of other entrepreneurs, particularly women and minorities who understood exactly what this moment meant. As the applause continued, Diana walked calmly toward the exit, her head held high and her award clutched firmly in her hand. Each step was deliberate and dignified, a stark contrast to the chaos she was leaving behind at the Whitmore family table. Behind her, she could hear Charles shouting something about lawyers and contracts, but his words were drowned out by the continuing applause. The Whitmore family's social standing was crumbling in real time, and Diana's principled stand was being celebrated by an industry that had waited too long to see someone stand up to this kind of behavior. As Diana reached the ballroom exit, she paused for one final moment. Without turning around, she spoke loudly enough for her voice to carry back across the room. Nexus Solutions will continue to thrive and grow without the Whitmore family's money. We'll do it on our own terms, with partners who respect what we've built and who we are. That's how real entrepreneurs succeed. With that, Diana Roberts walked out of the gala, leaving behind a billion-dollar deal but taking with her something far more valuable: her integrity, her dignity, and the respect of everyone who had witnessed her courage. Diana's phone started buzzing before she even reached the lobby of the hotel. By the time her car arrived, the notifications were coming so fast that the device was vibrating continuously. Videos of the confrontation were already spreading across social media platforms, shared and reshared by the hundreds of people who had been at the gala. As her driver navigated through the Manhattan traffic, Diana watched in real time as her story went viral. The hashtag #CheerDignityOverDollars was trending within an hour, with people sharing their own stories of workplace discrimination and standing up to powerful bullies. The video quality was surprisingly good, considering most had been shot on phones from across the ballroom. Every word of the exchange was clearly audible, from the Whitmore family's dismissive comments about diversity initiatives to Charles's final, shocking act of violence. There was no ambiguity about what had happened or who was at fault. Diana's assistant called before she even made it home. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing," she said breathlessly. "Every major news outlet wants an interview. 3 different venture capital firms have already called about funding. And Diana, you're not going to believe this, but 2 competitors to Whitmore Industries have reached out about acquisition offers." Diana felt a strange mix of emotions. The validation was gratifying, but she was still processing the trauma of what had happened. Being struck in public was humiliating, regardless of how dignified her response had been. Her cheek still ached, a physical reminder of Charles Whitmore's loss of control. By morning, the story had exploded across every platform. The video had been viewed millions of times, and "Dignity over dollars" was the top trending topic globally. News anchors were discussing the incident on morning shows. Business experts were analyzing the economic implications, and social media was flooded with support for Diana's principled stand. The response wasn't entirely positive, of course. Some commentators questioned whether Diana had been too confrontational, or suggested she should have handled the situation more diplomatically. A few even implied that she had somehow provoked Charles's violent reaction, but the overwhelming majority of responses supported Diana's decision to walk away from the deal. Entrepreneurs, business leaders, and ordinary people shared stories of their own encounters with discrimination and praised her courage in standing up to the Whitmore family's behavior. The impact on Whitmore Industries was swift and severe. Their stock price plummeted 20% in the first hour of trading, wiping out billions in market value. Major clients began canceling contracts, citing concerns about the company's leadership and values. The board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss Charles's future with the company. Meanwhile, Diana's phone continued to ring with opportunities. The 3 venture capital firms her assistant had mentioned turned out to be just the beginning. By the end of the week, she had received serious acquisition offers from 5 different companies, all of them exceeding the original billion-dollar Whitmore deal. More importantly, several firms offered to provide growth funding instead of buying the company outright, which would allow Diana to maintain control while expanding Nexus Solutions internationally. This had always been her preferred path, but the Whitmore deal had seemed too good to pass up at the time. The media attention also brought unexpected benefits. A congressional committee investigating discrimination in corporate America invited Diana to testify about her experiences. The invitation came with the opportunity to propose legislative solutions to prevent similar incidents in the future. Diana spent hours preparing for her testimony, working with policy experts to develop concrete recommendations for protecting entrepreneurs from discrimination. She wanted to turn her painful experience into meaningful change that would help others facing similar challenges. The hearing took place 6 weeks after the gala incident. Diana wore the same navy blue dress she had worn that night, partly as a symbol of resilience and partly to remind everyone watching of what had transpired. Her testimony was powerful and specific. She spoke about the subtle forms of discrimination that often precede dramatic incidents like the slap, describing how qualified entrepreneurs are routinely questioned about their capabilities based on their appearance rather than their track record. The attack on me was shocking because it was so public and so blatant, Diana told the committee. But the attitudes that led to that attack are present in boardrooms and investment meetings every single day. We need systemic change, not just outrage over individual incidents. Diana proposed several concrete solutions: mandatory bias training for anyone involved in merger and acquisition decisions, transparent reporting requirements for diversity in corporate leadership, and stronger legal protections for entrepreneurs facing discrimination. The committee members, both Republican and Democrat, seemed genuinely moved by her testimony. Several noted that the video from the gala had been a wake-up call about problems they had previously ignored or misunderstood. While Diana was building her profile as an advocate for change, Whitmore Industries continued to face consequences for Charles's behavior. The family board ultimately voted to remove him as CEO, though they allowed him to retain his shares and remain as chairman emeritus with no operational authority. Richard and Patricia Whitmore also faced professional consequences. Richard lost his position as head of acquisitions after several potential deals fell through due to the family's damaged reputation. Patricia's charitable foundation saw major donors withdraw their support, forcing her to step down from her leadership role. Margaret Whitmore, who had remained mostly silent during the confrontation, emerged as the family's primary spokesperson in the aftermath. She issued multiple public apologies and announced new diversity initiatives within their remaining business operations. But the damage to the Whitmore brand was severe and lasting. Their century-old reputation for business excellence was now overshadowed by Charles's moment of uncontrolled bigotry. The incident had revealed ugly truths about the family's attitudes that no amount of public relations could completely overcome. Diana, meanwhile, used the momentum from her viral moment to launch something she had been considering for years: the Nexus Foundation. Using part of her newfound wealth from strategic partnerships and licensing deals, she created a fund specifically designed to support underrepresented entrepreneurs in technology. The foundation provided not just funding but also mentorship, legal support, and access to networks that many talented entrepreneurs lacked. Within its first year, the Nexus Foundation had supported over 50 new startups, creating hundreds of jobs and generating millions in economic activity. Diana's company continued to thrive as well. Free from the constraints of the Whitmore acquisition, Nexus Solutions expanded into new markets and developed innovative products that pushed the boundaries of supply chain technology. The company's value increased to over $750 million, with Diana maintaining complete control over its direction. The personal cost of her stand had been significant. Diana had endured months of intense media scrutiny, death threats from internet trolls, and the ongoing stress of being a public figure. But she had also received thousands of messages from people thanking her for her courage and sharing their own stories of overcoming discrimination. A year after the gala incident, Diana received an invitation that brought everything full circle. The same technology organization that had honored her with the Entrepreneur of the Year award asked her to be the keynote speaker at the following year's event, standing on the same stage where she had accepted her award 12 months earlier. Diana reflected on everything that had changed. The ballroom was packed with entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders, many of whom had been present for the confrontation with Charles Whitmore. A year ago, I stood on this stage accepting an award that represented the culmination of 15 years of hard work. Diana began her speech. I thought that was the most important moment of my career. I was wrong. She paused, looking out at the audience that was hanging on every word. The most important moment came later that evening, when I had to choose between $1 billion and my dignity. I chose dignity, and it turned out to be the most profitable decision I ever made. Diana talked about the growth of her company, the success of the Nexus Foundation, and the policy changes that had resulted from her congressional testimony. But she also spoke about the personal growth that had come from standing up to powerful people who tried to diminish her worth. Success isn't just about building a valuable company or making a lot of money, Diana concluded. Success is about staying true to your values even when it costs you something. Success is about using your platform to lift others up. And success is about proving that dignity and principles are never for sale, no matter how much money is on the table. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. As Diana looked out at the crowd, she saw faces that reflected the changing demographics of the technology industry. More women, more people of color, more first-generation entrepreneurs who were building companies and changing the world. Her decision to walk away from the Whitmore deal had cost her $1 billion, but it had gained her something far more valuable, the knowledge that she had helped create a world where the next generation of entrepreneurs would face fewer barriers and more opportunities. Slap that was meant to put her in her place had instead elevated her to a platform she never could have imagined. And from that platform, Diana Roberts continued to build, to inspire, and to prove that true success comes not from compromising your values, but from having the courage to defend them when it matters most.